The deaths in Final Destination Bloodlines are bloody and elaborate, but some are more likely to happen than others. The movie is the sixth installment in the supernatural horror franchise, which began with the Devon Sawa-led movie Final Destination in 2000, follows various groups of people narrowly avoiding disaster, only for death itself to track them down and kill them in even more gory and outrageous ways in order to reassert its plans. These methods of death range from quick shocks like a car accident to much more elaborate chains of events that are reminiscent of a Rube Goldberg machine. 2025's Final Destination Bloodlines continues this tradition, doling out violent deaths to nearly every one of its named characters. The movie, which was directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein from a screenplay by Guy Busick and Laurie Evans-Taylor, features a robust cast that includes The Flash's Caitlin Santawana, Chuck's T.O. Briones, Stargirl's Breck Basinger, The 100's Richard Harmon, Julie and The Phantom's Owen Patrick Joyner, and Candyman's Tony Todd. Of the main cast, only Todd's recurring mortician character William Bloodworth survives, though it is implied that even he will perish shortly after the events of the movie Julia Campbell. Similar deaths have actually happened. Anna Law as Julia Campbell turning around while playing Jenna at the barbecue in Final Destination Bloodlines. By far the most probable death in Bloodlines is that of Julia Campbell's, Anna Law, the cousin of main character Stephanie Reyes, Caitlin Santawana. Early on in the movie, Julia is crushed in a garbage truck's trash compactor after accidentally being dropped into the compartment. In general, Final Destination deaths prey on common fears, and the idea of being crushed inside a garbage truck is not only common but has actually happened to several people over the years. Therefore, it is not outside the realm of possibility that this could happen to Julia. As gory as her demise is, the realism of the nature of her death overcomes the fact that the narrative device that gets her into that predicament is somewhat improbable. However, the process of the leaf blower kicking dust into children's eyes, causing them to kick a soccer ball into her face and knock her into a trash can being lifted into the truck, is intentionally improbable. When Stephanie warns Eric that this exact process might take place, it is meant to sound unbelievable so that when it actually happens, it proves to the others that her instincts about death and its design are entirely correct. 7. Darlene Campbell. Her quick death could easily take place. Rhea Kilstead as Darlene Campbell looking nervous at the barbecue in Final Destination Bloodlines. In Final Destination Bloodlines, Stephanie's estranged mother Darlene, Rhea Kilstead, is bisected by a falling lamppost at the isolated compound of her own estranged mother, Iris, Gabrielle Rose. This death is entirely likely, for several reasons. First, it could actually happen, as falling heavy objects can cause major damage. Second, Iris' compound is specifically designed to be a death trap. It is unclear if this is so Iris can protect herself from the outside or so she can use the jerry-rigged defense system to study death's design, but the area is chock full of objects that are dangerous for the uninitiated Iris Campbell. Her death is slightly more Rube Goldberg-esque. Gabrielle Rose as Iris Campbell screaming while holding her notebook in Final Destination Bloodlines. Iris' own death is more in line with the previous Final Destination movies, as it involves a Rube Goldbergian series of events. However, perhaps because death is impatient to strike her off its list after she has avoided it for decades, her death requires a slightly less complicated chain reaction than the other similar deaths in the movie. As was the case with her daughter Darlene's death, which takes place much later in the movie, the fact that Iris is impaled with her own weather vane is hardly unlikely, considering how rickety and jerry-rigged the exterior of her compound is. Howard Campbell. His death is scary but improbable. Alex Zahora as Howard Campbell lying on the grass with a lawn mower above his head in Final Destination Bloodlines. The death of Stephanie's uncle Howard, Alex Zahora, is potent because it harnesses two common fears by beginning with him stepping on a sharp piece of glass and ending with his head being destroyed by a lawn mower. However, the way he ends up in this situation is entirely improbable. While stepping on the glass and falling makes sense, the exact way the mower is accidentally started and then is lifted up in the air enough to fall down on his head proves that death had to manipulate the situation considerably in order to perfectly execute its plan for Howard, Stephanie and Charlie Reyes. Their deaths strain credibility. Caitlin Santawana as Stephanie Reyes and T.O. Briones as Charlie Reyes looking shocked in Final Destination Bloodlines. The final gag of the movie sees Stephanie and her brother Charlie, T.O. Briones, dying moments after realizing that they haven't actually foiled death's plan. Their death involves a penny on the train tracks derailing a train, which careens down the street toward them, stopping before it hits them, but sending logs flying into the air to crush them as they run. While the logs are a callback to the freeway catastrophe that opens Final Destination 2, their inclusion, and everything about the way the train derailment plays out, doesn't make much sense in terms of the laws of physics. The Skyview incident. It preys on real fears, but requires a lot to go wrong at once. Final Destination Bloodline Skyview incident continues the franchise's tradition of opening with a premonition of an enormous disaster claiming the lives of multiple people. In this case, the disaster involves Iris and her boyfriend Paul's, Max Lloyd-Jones, date on the opening night of a new restaurant called the Skyview, which is located at the top of a tower that is reminiscent of Seattle's Space Needle or Toronto's CN Tower. The disaster involves a glass dance floor shattering, an explosion rocking the restaurant, the stairway collapsing, the elevator falling, and huge chunks of the restaurant toppling down to the street below. This elaborate disaster, which harnesses the common fear of heights to great effect, may be terrifying, but it is ultimately entirely improbable. At the beginning of the scene, it is implied that the event, which is eventually prevented by Iris, was meant to take place because construction on the building was rushed. However, the fact that more than one element of the multi-stage disaster was caused by a single penny being tossed from the top of the tower requires a huge suspension of disbelief when it comes to the possibility of such an incident actually taking place in real life. Bobby Campbell. He probably should have died much sooner. Owen Patrick Joyner as Bobby Campbell on the hospital floor with his face swelling in Final Destination Bloodlines. The death of Julia's younger brother Bobby, Owen Patrick Joyner, is only improbable because of the way he perishes rather than the fact that he dies in the first place. He was already well down the path to death, because he and his brother Eric, Richard Harmon, conspired to asphyxiate him with his peanut allergy so they could bring him back to life and interrupt death's design. However, his life was eventually claimed by a spring from a vending machine being.